So ViX is our streamer, which launched in 2022. So it's about 2.5 years old, and it has evolved fast. I mean, it's been a couple of years now, and we have, even in the last year, it's almost doubled. Mainly, I mean, distribution's been a huge component of that as we added fast channel after fast channel and distributor after distributor. But it's also, really strong in terms of engagement and hours. So we're really happy with it. It's evolved to be more integrated with the linear product, meaning so when it first started, it had, a lot of self-contained ViX content, and then since then there's been a lot more back and forth of sports that have been airing. Copa America this summer, for example, will air on our linear channels. Other games will air on streaming. It's all kind of one big experience. So I would say that's the major evolution. The audience has grown and is, broader, but in general, it's that cross-pollination as it being a critical window and place for our content to live. I mean, we have all categories on the streamer now on our ViX 360, which is all of our streaming in one big package. Certain categories, it's really less about streaming and more about how people's Hispanic journey or their journey towards the Hispanic audience and how they're handling it, and it's different by category. So certain categories that you'd expect, like studios and auto and CPG and telco, have been big supporters of streaming, of Hispanic streaming. Other categories like pharma and finance have been a little slower to adopt, and we've made a lot of progress, but working with those. But those are slower in general with the Hispanic audience, have been. And so, that's just lining them up and knocking them down and working with them to get them comfortable. There's a lot of legal components to how those industries advertisers, but we have a long way to go with them.
So what about data addressability, buying audiences? How does that fit in, and what are the expectations of sponsors? And of course, the Hispanic audience is not, it's not one particular audience, it's many, and it's not all Spanish speaking either completely. So it's diverse in its own way.
Yep.
How do you sell that and service brands in this sort of diversified universe?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, that's absolutely true, and our audience is from many different countries of origin. They're different spectrum of comfort with the English language. There's length of time in country. In general, this is a younger audience. It's a very bilingual audience, and it is relatively comfortable moving back and forth between English and Spanish. So in general, that what we look to do and help advertisers with is to find the things to tie into that unite the Hispanic audience and the different segments, and there's lots of them. Music is a great one. We talk a lot about music, and it's the cultural fusion that's happening in Latin music. Is really incorporating elements of all different types of music, and so it's a unifier. And my recommendation is to focus on the unifiers. Language is a unifier, whether they're bilingual, English dominant, or Spanish dominant. In general, our audience feels strongly about being spoken to in Spanish and being advertised to in Spanish from a heartstring standpoint, less from a transaction standpoint. They are perfectly comfortable transacting in English, but from a making kind of inroads and really connecting, that's where the language thing comes into play. So I think in streaming, we've been able to deliver content for each of the different segments, right? There's some stuff that comes from Mexico, other content's coming from Puerto Rico, so we're able to have a really great kind of mezcla, really great mix of content for something for everyone. And streaming allows you to do that because you're not beholden to a linear feed. But at the same time, it's these big cultural events like Copa America or Latin Grammys that bring all of these sort of segments together into one big whole.
Dan, what kind of progress has been made in terms of understanding the Spanish-speaking population in the United States in terms of viewership? And I know that's been an important issue for you guys for a while. Where do things stand?
So it's kind of in evolution. So I think, and actually streaming and linear are two places that are very different right now in terms of that. So with streaming, when we launched ViX and in general, when we arrived at TelevisaUnivision, we built a household data graph, which does a great job of measuring our audience and covering our audience across the United States so that we could understand behaviors and help advertisers get really smart about this audience and help them connect with this audience. And that was, there's linear implications and it works amazing in linear. It was primarily built for the digital ecosystem. And so in streaming, we really don't have a Hispanic visibility problem. Right? We know who's on our streamer. We have our own first-party data. That is clearly sizing the audience. We can see the entire audience and get credit for the entire audience. In linear, we have an older system, the Nielsen panel system, which is the main currency. That system is outdated. It was really built for a prior time in television viewing when fewer shows had bigger overall audiences, and therefore a smaller panel could work. But what we found is that as shows and content have become more fragmented, you're missing key parts of the audience, and so it really does underserve and undersee minority audiences, especially Hispanic. So one of the things that I think is a big shift to get us to where we are in streaming, where we can really see the audience, and you know, it's a equal, equity-based system where every audience counts the same. In linear, we have an issue where the Hispanic audience counts less or is seen less, and that needs to change. And there's a product that will change that, and it's luckily coming from Nielsen. It's the panel plus big data solution, and that will be the new currency for television across the board, and we're excited about that because it really does do a better job of recognizing our audience and allows marketers to make better decisions based on that data.
What have you found through the ViX experience? What have you learned about the consumer experience, the consumer preference, and what they want to see in terms of ad load, ad units?
Sure.
You know, give us your perspective on that.
Sure. I think the difference with ViX and a lot of streamers is that the content on ViX is almost exclusive to ViX, right? So it doesn't exist somewhere else in large library drops. It's content that the audience really wants and only has access to on ViX or streamer. So I think that because of that, we've been able to I don't think advertising has been a concern or a problem, and we started with advertising. We've kept the ad loads low, but in general, there hasn't been any sort of pushback, and we have different types of content, right? There's video on demand content, and there's live content, live stream content, TCS, soccer, et cetera. So the ad loads are different for each of those, but in general, I think if you keep it at a certain level where it's like acceptable and somewhat below television, I think you're in good shape with the exclusive content that we have and the demand that we have for it. I think what you'll see in streaming is experimenting with different tiers. You have folks who are coming from a non-ad scenario, adding ads, and we'll see how that goes through with their audiences, but there's a price benefit. We'll be experimenting, and when we are launched with a premium plus ads tier, which is in that middle ground. It's a lower ad load, but it's more access to our premium content. So I think there's a lot to learn for how to kind of maximize subscribers and optimize the consumer experience with this, but I'm excited that all the experimentation's going on. In general, I think the content type and environment really determines the tolerance of the audience for amount of ads.